everybody. Thank you for coming to our talk today. Okay, legally compliant, an incident handler's take on cyber legal in an incident. It's going to be a good talk. Thank you all for coming. Moving on to our agenda right away, we have who we are, what happens before an incident, what happens in an incident, what happens after an incident. What does this all mean? And then we'll have some time for questions, if there are questions. We'll see. So who are we? My name is Renz. I live in Minnesota. I've been there my whole life. IT and cybersecurity has been my passion for the last 15 years. I care more about quality and do my best to make it show in my everyday work. This is my second time speaking at WWHF Hackin Fest. I had a blast my first time, and I'm sure my second time will be just as fun. Bradford?
Yeah, Bradford Alt. Nice to everybody come today. So I learned the power of giving back, and that's something that I enjoy to do and to share with the community, and that's part of why I'm here, so I appreciate it. Always spent most of my career trying to make things better than when I found them, and doing what I can do for people. So, yeah, that's me.
Awesome. Quick question for the crowd. Anyone here a lawyer? Great. We are not lawyers. This is a disclaimer before we get the talk going. Anything and everything you see here today is strictly just based on experiences, right? I don't know the laws left and right, nor would I be probably holding up in a court defending myself. So just FYI, make sure you keep that. So everything we talk about today might be different depending on which country you're in, which province you're in, which state you're in. So just make sure you're aware of those things. So why this topic? First and foremost, we're seeing right away that there is a huge convergence of cyber and legal being converged right now. You know, some of you might actually be working under your legal teams in your companies. I know some corporations are already doing that. For some of you, you might be in a mom and pop shop where basically there isn't a legal team. But more and more we're seeing that. And that's mostly because of this increased regulation that's coming down more and more so. You know, you have the GDPR, the SEC, NYDFS, CCPA, all of those different types of regulations. So, and a lot of that's coming up because of all of the attacks that have been coming recently, right? You have a lot more sophisticated attacks, deeper breaches, AI. So there's more and more regulation coming out around this to kind of curb that down. And then the third reason for this talk and why we like to do it is we just want to help people be better at incident response. Just make sure they're getting their mean time to resolution faster, mean time to detection, first touch, trying to make sure that everything is quality and good. Any notes, Bradford?
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to say, and some of you may not fit in this category of having legal, having cyber, but we want to address that as well during the talk. So making sure that you're kind of aligning to things, protecting your organization as if you were going to, if you did have legal staff advising you, or cyber running next to you and telling you what to do next. So we didn't want to leave a large group of the people out, so hopefully you find some value in that.
All right. So we normally follow the pick-roll framework. I believe everyone's here. If you're an incident responder, you're probably very familiar with the pick-roll framework. So right away here, we're going to start with the preparation phase. And just for everyone, I kind of referenced everything here and highlighted. That way you know where we're at. So right away, things to think about before an incident, vocabulary, right? How are you communicating your incident? How are you talking about things? One of the first things that I normally bring up when it comes to incident is the big bad B word. Of course, that word is breach. Basically, whenever anything's going on, any type of event or whatever is going on, I tell everybody, do not say that word. I try to build a culture in my company, do not say this word at all. This is a legal word that I always say. The only person who can say it in my company is a lawyer, so I can't even say it. And if anybody else in our companies, and I've been in incidents before with other people who've said it, I give them like nasty eyes. I'm like, you better not. So, or take it back, because it's not a breach yet, not until we've confirmed it. So I just think that's a huge piece to just kind of build that culture. The reason why is just because if you start saying breach, things might spin out of control, or that you get away from the narrative of actually what's going on, or it could just be a false positive. And guess what? You might have already told clients, we've been breached. Oh wait, now we got to retract that because, well, hey, which can lead to some legal trouble in the future because they might sue you for something that didn't even happen. The second piece of vocabulary, and this has been more recent too, find out what word is okay to say in your environment. So some people can say incident, some people can say security event, some people just can say event is going on. And so just make sure it's the same between everybody, because you might talk to a different person in your teams and they might be saying, yeah, we've got a security event going on, where somebody else might be saying, yeah, we've got an incident. Well, what does that mean really? So just make sure that you're understanding that thing. It's more so that you can keep the communication flow going in your team and things are all concise. Just like our IT vocabulary we use, we just want to make sure everything is clear and concise on that. Any ads, Bradford?
Yeah, I mean, you don't have a lawyer to define those terms for you. So, I think it's important to define that inside your organization. You may not have the lawyer, may not have the cyber legal teams. Define that so that when you're going through things, your leadership understands what you're saying to them, so it doesn't become a panic. It's a nice, comfortable thing. We all have had that discussion of the B word or incident versus event. What are you going to use? It just kind of sets that expectation, kind of sets the precedent for moving forward through things. So that type of a planning will be beneficial.
All right. The next topic I've got is on cyber insurance. Now, before I go too far on the cyber insurance piece, I obviously understand probably not everybody has cyber insurance. Raise your hand who maybe has cyber insurance. Right? Well, most of the room, actually. That's pretty good. But for you that doesn't have cyber insurance, we're going to do our best to also clarify some things, just because if you don't have cyber insurance, it's not that you can't do some of these things. It's just probably a tougher route because you don't have those professionals in those job roles. So we're going to try and do our best to split between to kind of make sure that here's what happens when you have cyber insurance. Here's what will happen if you don't have cyber insurance. Cyber insurance, first thing, and maybe everyone knows this, maybe everybody doesn't know this, but cyber insurance has tons of services that they offer or can offer. You just want to make sure you're talking with your cyber insurance. So one of the things they might offer is maybe a breach counsel, and that's all included in your premiums, right? And I know for a lot of people, they try not to talk to their cyber insurance until they're like, shoot, we're going to need to enter in a claim. But that's not necessarily the case. If you have a good relationship with your cyber insurance, you can get with them and even talk about certain things that maybe services they offer. And like I said, one of their service offerings they might have is breach counsel, ransomware negotiators. They might give you discounts on forensics. They might even give you discounts on endpoint detection response tools. And in fact, right now, I think my company with our cyber insurance, we're getting a risk assessment tool for free, just because they're like, hey, we want you to do risk assessments, and then we'll lower your premiums on top just for doing them. So if you're not maybe familiar with what services your cyber insurance is giving you, maybe call them, talk to them, or just have a conversation, especially with renewal time, because anything and everything that you're doing to make your cybersecurity better can lower those premiums. And I'll get to insurance requirements for a bit, but Bradford, I guess, from that perspective, do you want to talk about if they don't have cyber insurance?
Yeah, I mean, you still want to prepare as if you do have it. You can see you have some of these services. There are free tools out there that you can utilize and to work with, and showing that you're doing your due diligence in your day-to-day work, doing your IR. I think it's important to just kind of mirror that, even though if you can't afford it. But look up the common requirements of cyber insurance and try to match those. Look at a framework. Pick a framework that makes sense for your organization, or pick pieces from them that all shows that you're doing your work. You're guided, it's intentional, it's just not a reaction. So again, look for those free resources out there. We'll share a couple here or there, but there's other ones out there to help keep you organized and those things. And then document what you have. So during those incidents, you know what you have. It's kind of what does your networks look like? What is your PII, your PHI? What do you have in your networks? Those types of things, and then start to map that out. Like, if I had ransomware, what would I need to protect? So cyber usually will tell you this is what you need to do. Well, you don't have it, so now you start to align those needs that you have. Maybe do manufacturing. How do I protect the manufacturing floor from being shut down? So.
Yeah, and now onto like the kind of more negative side of cyber insurance. Not always, like, depending on what requirements they have on you. So they might want you to make sure you have like MFA on all your admin, make sure you have secure backups, make sure you have just kind of a good baseline of security items or things like that. If you run into an incident and they find out, oh, you didn't have MFA on your accounts, we're not going to cover this. So just be aware of that. I know that's that's just a warning side with the cyber insurance people. So just make sure that you're doing everything, and you make sure you ask them, what's the checklist? What do you need? And what Bradford was saying, a good example with our cyber insurance, we have a whole mapping of all of our technologies and tools, and we share that with our cyber insurance, and they lowered our premiums for it because they're like, oh, we know exactly what you're doing and how you're doing it. Great, we'll lower your premiums. But quick blurb on cyber insurance. No, I'm not trying to sell you on cyber insurance. I'm sorry. I know it's worked out good for me. So, on to the next topic, policies. So, when you're preparing for incidents and things, you have to have these in place, in order. I think a lot of times people, they don't really use the AUP, the acceptable use policy, as much as I think they should. That is your rules to your user, right? Your end user, okay? And if you don't dictate if they're doing something wrong, let's say they go out and use an AI that's maybe not authorized, or they go use their computer for something else and start downloading software, when maybe in your acceptable use policy, you have a very determinate list of programs that they're allowed to download. Well, now you can kind of say, hey, you're not listening to this. I think that's part of the training. It's just making sure users actually see that part. I know the acceptable use policy, they jam so much in there. I try to always make it a point whenever we go through it, is like, make sure you just read the blurb that's about your computer usage and how you should be using your computer. I think it's very important and sometimes eye-opening for them too. They're like, oh, I didn't know we had a list of programs. What programs can I have? Oh, great, they're right here. Sometimes you have software that you can share, like easily they can install the programs and things, but now, more on acceptable use? No?
Yeah, I mean, try to have one in place, whether it protects you or not. If leadership approved it and you have to reference it, it's not like coming out of the blue. It doesn't seem like you're to the Department of No. We have reasons, we have rules. It's just very important to have it in place. Again, a lot of free templates out there. So if you don't have those resources to help you with those or provide those, we can, email us and we can help you out too. But
cool. All right, incident response plan. I'm sure everyone's got an incident response plan, right? That they follow and they know every word of. Just kidding. My incident response plan is 56 pages long. Just letting you all know. It's too long, I know, but I put everything in it. And some big items that I think should be in your incident response plan is making sure you have a crisis communication plan. For our reference, everything for crisis communication goes through our legal team. And in truth, in our incident response plan, I actually have a foolproof list of everyone who's involved in an incident. This includes which C-level is going to get involved, which legal person's getting involved, who's in charge of the incident, so that way no one's like, oh, it's my incident. No, this person's the incident commander, he's in charge of it. I just like to do all that. That way it's very organized when we get into an incident, because otherwise it'll be just chaos. So just make sure you put all those prep steps in there. But for crisis communication, I think it's very important. I don't know if everybody does this. We have pre-written scripts that we will send to external entities. We will send to internal employee companies, as well as maybe something that we're going to send to, let's say, like NYDFS regulation, right? And we had those pre-written by lawyers. That way it's already written. So I'm not sitting here going like, all right, what are we going to say to them now? No, I got a script. I fill in my 2 blanks of things that I need and shoot it out. The faster you are in front of that, again, it's a PR problem. You get in front of the communication piece, and in the end, it'll help keep everything nice and smooth, especially end users, because a lot of times you're in the middle of an incident, they're getting calls like, what's going on? We need to know. So if you can get something out to your end users, at least to say, hey, don't say anything yet. We're going through kind of an event or an incident, depending on whatever you're naming it. And then they'll kind of like, okay, this is what we'll tell outside clients. Sorry, it's not accessible right now. We're kind of in the middle of something, but we don't want to overplay our hand and cause more issues in the long run. The other big piece is playbooks. Playbooks, in my definition of playbooks, is like very specific rules that go through. If a computer gets stolen, I use this tool to track it. I use this tool to lock it down. I use this tool to isolate it. And here's where I document it all. And it's very explicit. Playbooks are very explicit, and they're for specific issues going on. Like I said, if you lose a laptop, here's what happens. If you're ransomware, here's what we do. I'm trying to think of other incident types. The reason why they're so explicit is because think if you're on, what if your top person's on PTO, right? And they don't know what tool to use to isolate a PC. So that's why I like to write the playbooks where it's like, hey, they can just follow it step by step. They can do it, especially if you have a maybe younger person who's following up when everyone else is on PTO, or you have an all-company meeting and you have that one guy who normally doesn't cover incidents covering an incident at the time. So I think it also keeps me where I don't have to be on the phone when I am on PTO 24/7. So.
Yeah, incident response plan. I went through an exercise and tried to write one just out of the blue because I've always been living underneath one. Someone's always had it pre-written, and it's overwhelming. And so I just wanted to point, you can use some AI to help you get some categories or some, what are the key points of an incident response, break those out and start to work through your organization what makes the most sense. If you don't have one or don't have the support, I wouldn't use AI to write the entire thing because it's not going to match what your organization needs or wants. But in regards to playbooks, I sometimes ignore my playbook, and I go through and try to find, I said it out loud. I try to go through and find gaps where maybe it's not in there type of scenario. So I just should start with a checklist. I'm a big checklist person. That's essentially what a playbook is anyways. But it's important to, if you don't have one, to develop it and build it into chunks and make it more organized and efficient over time. And then even if you have it memorized, bring it back out every single time. You might have seen something that you've never seen before, and you want to have it in that scenario of a playbook to say, in this type of scenario, look for this, or always look for this. It may not necessarily be part of what you're working through, but I think it's good to do that. So, just the policy part, just don't be overwhelmed with it. Talk to others, and ask them, what are you guys doing for this type of scenario? Type of thing. So.
Yeah. So to recap, these are things to try and get figured out before you have an incident. So if you were to go home tomorrow and say, I don't have an incident, Ben, what should I be doing? These things right here. So at least review them. Next, we're going to move into what happens in an incident. So the main two stages in an incident, right? You're going to be in identification and containment, right? You're going to be finding things. As you find things, you contain them. Then you find other things, then you contain them. So I always feel like this one's a fluid one. You jump back and forth between identification and containment. So some of the big pieces with this is document as you go. I know probably everyone here is writing notes, but make sure you're writing like crazy good notes and crazy intense notes. Even something, and I think this came from a John Strand class years ago. He used to say, even if you ran across something and you're like, oh, that's interestingly weird, but has nothing to do with it, write it down. And he's like, when he came back later, he found out it actually looped into the incident at some point in time. So just make sure you're documenting as you go. And I've seen too many, and depending on your company style and type, right? I've seen MSPs, I've seen other people where they're trying to contain the incident as they go. They're like, oh, we saw a BEC, we saw a rule change, we went in there, we deleted the rule right away, and we moved on, Ben. Don't worry about it, we got it. And I'm like, okay, did you get a screenshot? What was the rule doing? Oh, crap. And we're like, well, that's great. So we don't know really what they were doing. We just know they were forwarding emails to another file folder or something. So just make sure you're keeping all that evidence. It's super important too later. collecting all that evidence, because if you go further, if you have to go into, let's say you have to go talk to the government because you now have a compliance error, or not a compliance error, but you have to go just report it. It's good to have all that evidence because they want to know what happened as well. And then for cyber insurance to link back, cyber insurance wants to prove, was this preventable beforehand or not? So, so it's always good to keep all that evidence because they're going to want to ask all that evidence. And then the next thing too is just make sure you're always continuing to widen your scope and understand your scope of your incident. That'll help too when you're documenting, right? Because you document out each side of the incident, but you're going to want to make sure that you have everything scoped out pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, the first time I did an IR, I didn't write anything down. I didn't collect anything. I mean, most people may have a notepad of paper. I'm starting to use OneNote and other documents, and my biggest thing is about keep your sections organized. Like each type of log source or each finding, you have to document the where, the why, the when, the time. Because if you have to, like he said, if you find something that's like an anomaly that doesn't make sense and you have to go back to it, you're not having to rework it and lost it and don't know where it is. You have all that captured. So take a deep breath, do what you need to do, go get some food, sit down, and just start organizing out as you go and go and go. And I think it's okay to say, I got to hit pause, document, keep going. And if you're just by yourself, obviously that's a little chaotic, but very large events, you might want to assign someone to do note taking, or your incident commander might help you or assign somebody for you. But that organization is huge. We get information that's completely disorganized, just a dump of Excel sheets with no log name. We have no idea. It's very hard. So again, speaking to the room of people who don't have the support of, a forensics team through cyber or legal, just take it very simple, very slow, document everything.
Yeah, make it more clear, make sure you're documenting everything. Incident escalation. So if let's say you're in an incident, something's happening, you know what's going on. And again, I mentioned on this in the incident response plan, you're going to want to make sure you're continuing communicating with your leadership. That way they understand what's going on. Now, again, you're going to want to establish a leader who's actually going to listen to you. Otherwise, they won't care. And I'm not saying, here's the summary doc of what's going on. I'm saying, nope, we found this. Here's the next item. We found this. They might not understand, but they'll appreciate being looped in, and they'll have your back then going forward. But I think it's just really important to have that chain of communication line going on. And when you hit a certain point, right, you're going to want to bring in your legal teams and stuff like that. And here's where maybe we diverge again to the people who maybe have a lawyer or legal that can jump into an incident, and those who don't. And there are third-party legal teams you can hire externally and bring into these incidents. Anything you want to mention on that before we jump to the privilege and stuff? Okay, all right, I'll keep going. Because then too, if you're in an incident, you might be pulling in your forensics team. They might not be baked in with your MSP or MDR. You might have to go get a third-party forensics. Fun note on that one as well, make sure whatever forensics you're bringing in, your cyber insurance is already pre-approved. If they're not, they might say, do it again with one that we have approved on. So just make sure. Now, it's not hard to get approved for insurance. You just have to make sure that they approve it beforehand. But cyber insurance can help you with third-party forensics. Again, they can get you discounts. Once legal comes in, they'll probably throw down the word privilege, right? And maybe some of you know what that means, maybe some of you doesn't know what that means, but the idea is to kind of keep that information tight-knit with the group that's talking about it. Just because you never know what kind of information is going to come in an incident. Once they bind that with privilege, right, the legal guy will just say, I'm here, and now we have privilege. So it means anything you can say, whatever you want in that incident, it's all going to stay within the scope of that privilege, and nothing's going to get out. If you complain about this stupid user doing this thing again, that's all in privilege, doesn't need to leave the room. That being said, it's more important if you're using third-party people. That way they keep it also tight-knit and enclosed with their groups. One thing we'll see is like an MSP. We don't want them sharing that information with maybe other customers and things like that at this point in time if we're going through an incident and event. So the next step on that too, once you get far enough along in your incident, you'll run into a situation of discovery, which will be just great and fine. That's when you give your forensic groups enough access where they can pull information, and now probably another lawyer group, or maybe the lawyer group you already brought in, has to go through a discovery phase. That discovery phase, potentially in this instance, a good example I'm referencing is, let's say you get into a BEC situation, they get compromise of the user accounts, they have full access, they can download the files, things like that. They're going to be starting to look for PHI, PII type information. Discovery is probably the longest part of an incident because it can take so long to get through everybody's email right now. I'm waiting for them to kick out maybe an AI. I don't know how that would work though with like legal proceedings and discovery to go through your email and find all PHI, PII. But as of right now, that's like a big pain point, and that really slows down incidents quite a bit. And when I mean slow down, it could take a week, it could take a month just to get through discovery, which is kind of painful.
Yeah, I just want to go back to communication. I think if you don't have insurance, again, I'm not going to keep saying, I guess, but if it isn't dictated how you need to communicate that out, have that meeting with your boss, your supervisor, leadership, saying, how do you want me to communicate things? You could have gone through an incident and never communicated it to anybody. So I think it's important to have that exercise with your leadership. Set the parameters, lay out how you want me to communicate what's going on, what makes sense for you all, and how you want me to communicate it. Do you want me just to do a complete debrief? You want me to go into detail? You want me just to give you an executive summary type scenario? But I think going through that role of that communication, even though you may not be told to do it a certain way, I think is a very valuable thing. And it shows your due diligence that you're working through it. Should it become a legal situation, you have done all of your work. You're following through the processes that we kind of are lining out. So it in a way protects you a bit from any other future, you could get fired or legal or whatever it might be, or, why didn't you tell me type of scenario conversation you're having.
Yeah, it's important to get a leader who understands that they own the risk, even though you're solving the risk, right? So we're going to get to the next two phases, eradication and recovery. Eradication is those long-term things you would do to fix issues, and recovery is bringing back backup drives and things like that. So now that you've gotten through your identification containment, and that's like what I said, when you get to discovery piece, that's going to take a while. This is where the incident starts to slow down. Those first two incidents are like 24 hours, you're probably not sleeping maybe. And then these are the next week, next month, depending where you're at. When we talk about evidence protection, or all that evidence, all that documentation you took, make sure you're protecting it. Make sure it's going into a file system that you trust, or a shared file system. Some companies will just spin up a Dropbox and say, we have a Dropbox, we're sharing it with each party that needs to have access to the data, and then it's there. And that's kind of important just to make sure everyone has access without overextending access to like your SharePoint and things like that. So sometimes it's a lot easier to just use a third party and then burn away that afterwards. Obviously you save all the data down after you're done with it, but that way each party that needs to have access to it can have access to it. And like I was saying before, you can bring in, this is when you might start communicating with your cyber insurance. We've got an event, we're already investigating with, and you probably should have already involved your cyber insurance, but they might be able to help and take over for you from the breach assistance perspective. Okay, here's who we need to communicate for your state. Here's who we need to communicate for, whatever regulation maybe you're under. If you're under NYDFS, you're gonna have to write to NYDFS, or SEC, you'll have to write to SEC. They can help coach you through that portion of it, because cyber insurance, they wanna find the least level of risk. Now, let's get into a situation where, let's say there is PHI, PII in an event, but you don't have customers' information, so you can't mail them, right? How do you tell them that they were involved in essentially a breach? Well, you have to set up like a call center. You have to set up notices on the website saying we had an event that happened. Here's a call center. You call them in, and they'll let you know based on information you give them. Yes, some of your information was taken out, and here's what information they have. Maybe they have a social security number. Maybe they have a driver's license, anything like that. Cyber insurance will help you set all that up. If you don't, a third-party legal team can help you set that type of stuff up. But I know those are weird gotchas in an incident, like walking that far into the incident. So now I'm past all the cybersecurity stuff. But
Yeah, evidence protection. Store it somewhere where you still own the documents once you upload it, right? I mean, that's an important thing. I've heard of people putting, I put it here, and it's like, well, you read the policy, you don't own that anymore, and you just shared personal information out there. So that's now another event, and it could be scary. So, and then like Ben's talking about breach assistance, if you don't have it, talk to your MSP or MSSP. Maybe they have like a few hours they give you, or some type of a service as you pay for it. Some SOCs will do IR, some SOCs will do that. Some, EDR products will help you out with certain things. But I mean, talk to people, talk to your reps. They might provide that free support hour. So you can get creative.
yeah, and now comes the paperwork side, right, of the incident. Reporting it all down. You've been taking all this information, but there's obviously one thing you want to make sure, and this sometimes will be in your incident response plan, maybe it isn't, but an incident summary form. And actually, for the sake of this talk, actually, Bradford and I did create an incident summary form that we'll share. And here's kind of some of the pages to it. Bradford, I don't know if you want to talk to it a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty simple, but when you're in the mix, it's good to have a document to work through. Anything highlighted in yellow, when did it occur? That's something cyber insurance is going to ask you. It's something everybody's going to ask you is, when did this occur? When did it happen? A big one, root cause. At times you have to say, I don't know what the root cause is, but if you're going to identify it, that helps you out immensely to know where the root cause was. Again, that's where you might ask an MSSP to help you out. Can you help me with your logs that maybe I'm familiar or not familiar with? A SOC, those types of scenarios to get to that root. But literally, who discovered it is also could be important, because you need to know who could talk to. You might have to do an interview. So I've seen comes in like user, let us know. Who's the user? I don't remember. So as you're building those checklists and writing and documenting, you could pull this sheet out and literally just start.
Yeah, and the root cause, what's super important about that, I'm thinking of like cyber insurance, they're going to want to know, how are you going to fix this in the future? So if you know where the root cause is, you know how to stop it from ever happening again, hopefully. So next page of this sheet.
Yeah, who holds the evidence is a big one. If you're a big team, you don't always know who has what. You're literally moving in multiple streams trying to figure this out. So like your incident commander or someone who's been designed or designated as the note taker might start to bring that in and make a chart and list it out for you so you can have it in detail. Again, how's the evidence being protected? We talked about that. And then containment actions. Cyber is always going to want to know, okay, well, what did you do? You know what you did, what happened, now how do you contain it? So documenting that out is very important as well, and being as detailed as you can be. Recommended steps to reduce the impact. So they're always going to ask you, you contained it, but now what are you going to do to prevent it? You're building out your timeline, your story, your playbook of what are next steps. So as you're coming into lessons learned, the user information might be important, because lessons learned is this person does something that's probably more risky than what their roles is designated for type of scenario. So it's important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So moving into the final process of the incident, lessons learned. Sometimes the most forgotten side of it, right? So, the whole goal behind lessons learned is, how do we make things smoother? Can we make it faster? Do we have log sources, tools? What more can we add? What could we have done better in the future? Is there more communication we could add? Let's get some third-party lawyers just on speed dial in the future. Maybe we need a new forensics team. We hated the report we got this last year. But I think too many teams skip this step after the incident, and I think it's unfortunately a travesty. Because the whole goal of this step is to just make things smoother for you in the future. So your next incident, it's not a nightmare. Once you have one, you're like, never again, please.
Lessons learned help you with your playbooks. So go back and refer to your documents, your IR policies, your acceptable use. We saw something come up that wasn't part of our acceptable use. We can't take action on it, but you know what? Hey, people person, HR person, this is what we've been seeing.
Yeah, like maybe your incident response plan that's 56 pages long is a little too long. I'm sorry.
Did I say I ignore them sometimes?
I like details.
Yeah, okay.
All right, wrapping up. We just, hopefully you guys gleaned some good information out of this, or maybe you were just like, preach it, you know? I don't know. I'm sure there's quite a few points where you guys are all the same on this, but the idea is just kind of, hopefully we can get better expertise, we can make things cleaner. Ultimately, what you're going to need to really know when you get into kind of like a legal situation or even government situation, make sure it's all tight knit. There isn't inconsistencies, and you're documented everything. You have your evidence taken care of, you have all your people taken care of, and everything will go kind of smoothly. Any last pieces for wrap up, Bradford?
No, I mean, you know, talk to people, talk to us, talk to friends. Just continue to learn about this stuff.
Questions or no questions? I don't know. It's fine. All right.
Statistically, what's the number of incidences? So statistically, do you have any idea what the number of incidents are that occur every year with small businesses, big businesses?
Every year? It changes every year.
Well, guess.
Well,
Is it 100, 1,000?
oh, God. For what? For a company in particular? Or just
All companies in the United States.
for all companies in the United States? I think it was like somewhere near like 40,000 last year. But of course, some of the incidents are not big. You know, you're not getting like, these huge incidents and things like that. I do know one interesting statistic, the shift from, they're not hitting big corporations. That's the one you hear about. The shift is like 60% is in small to medium businesses, which they wouldn't do half of this work, right, when it comes to incident work. Okay, well.
It costs $10,000.
That's why we wanted to address both sides of the puzzle here, you know, or the picture.
I've also, for asking a question, I've got swag.
Everybody's
So
gonna
if you
do
want, I've got like a T-shirt and a hat. You want a hat?
What kind of hat is it, like your hat?
Kind of. It's got the same symbol.
That's a cool hat. You don't have a black one, do you? Black hat?
There you are.
Cool.
Any other questions? Yeah. Have I had to testify? No. Thank God, no. All I do, I write my incident response report. I write that summary report. I send it over to cyber insurance. I send it with my legal guy. My legal guy does the work. I'm like, thank you. Hands off for me.
Yeah, the closest I've been is on some security video, you know, of an incident across the street type of a thing,
got a
gets subpoenaed,
shirt.
but luckily
Shirt?
nothing, yeah.
Yeah. Black or this one? This one. There you go. Sorry. Almost didn't make it. Yes.
Do you have anything to say in regards to correction of error documents or documenting exactly what happened, what is what you mitigated, how you mitigated it, all that stuff, so you can have that as a record for either legal purposes in the future or.
Yes, actually, in the form, there is a spot that states, which, by the way, here's the link to the form if anybody wants that incident response form. I forgot to switch to the slide to show everybody. But in there, we actually do have a section where you say, write down what you've done already, right? You want to track what you've done. Why? Because between that containment and eradication phase, right? Or containment, you're just trying to stop the bleeding. Maybe you're doing something quick or just to stop the bleeding. Eradication's where you're saying, okay, we actually just need to patch a server. Maybe we isolate it in this situation, and now we can unisolate, but let's get that patch in so it's no longer vulnerable to whatever attack happened. So, but then you want to document that. So in our form, actually, we have a spot that we state, like, what have you already done? What are proposals you need to do, right? That way you kind of track it all. Because you want to be tracking everything you're doing. That's where change management comes in. I didn't talk about that, but that's because everyone hates change management.
You'll find a risk register there and like a RACI matrix. The risk register would help you track your risk. And then we have a little spot in there, normally you don't see it, but for budget. So you can kind of start to have an idea of like, to mitigate this risk, you know, this is what it might cost. So, yeah.
Okay, and you had a question?
Yeah, so what are your thoughts on working in law enforcement?
So what are your thoughts on bringing in law enforcement? I've been cautioned that law enforcement and your objectives may not be the same thing.
Correct. Now, a point to make, ransomware, right? All ransomware, if you're planning on doing a payment, you have to notify law enforcement. So that is you must do that for that. So just make sure you note that. Become friends with them, but don't tell them everything. You know, you can only trust the government so far. Shoot, I'm on record saying that now. Anyway, you can get them involved. Sometimes they're a little bit slower. They might slow down the process. They might want specific things that maybe you're like, that doesn't matter. Why are you asking for it? Let's just move on. The one positive is if it becomes like a super like lawsuit, things like that, if you involve the cops earlier, then they can help you with the lawsuit, or at least maybe it shrinks that lawsuit a little bit. Because you got them involved right away. But more so, I would trust your legal team first.
Or go get legal before you involve.
Yeah. Get legal and have legal say, hey, do we want to involve cops at all? And
You're now under privilege.
Be like, sure, we can. There are specific situations where, yes, you would get like police involved. Like I said, ransomware would be one. Yeah, FBI. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, FBI. Like human trafficking, you definitely want to get them involved in that. So I think that's trying to think of like other situations where you get police involved. Theft, obviously, or any like a physical building stuff. So.
Yeah, I mean, if someone's running, say, I'm calling. Just slow them down, think about it, consult. Yeah.
I was just going to say that there are some cases where if you're in a situation where you need to make a public disclosure, so there was an event and you're going to have to tell everybody about it, law enforcement you can use them to reset that timer.
Yeah.
Because you've told your customers you're going to tell them about an incident in 72 hours. And frankly, you're not, and you don't want to, and it's not in your interest to do so. Getting law enforcement can embargo that information, which maybe gets you a 30-day hot timer where you can not conceal, but yes, they have different expectations and goals than you, but sometimes you can use that.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a good point about the timer piece, because I didn't talk about it too much, but like you don't need to, well, I shouldn't say that, I'm a lawyer, but my lawyers have told me before in the past, once you know who's affected by it, that's when your timer starts. It doesn't start when the incident happens. So just be aware of that. That is a huge change when the conversion of cyber and legal hit, right? Because it's kind of like conceptually, you're like, we got hit, we got to report in 72 hours, we got to know as much as we can so we report it. Or legal says, pump the brakes, we can't report until we know who's affected and by full scope. So. And that's from my lawyer. I didn't say that. Yes.
What's been your experience with ransomware negotiators, good or bad?
I stay out of the room. I hire people. I mean, I would assume, again, never been in one. I would assume it's kind of like a hostage negotiation where you can get a little fired up because they might do, a lot of groups now are doing double extortion. So it's kind of like, wait, how do I know you're not just going to release this after I pay you anyway? I mean, half the time I'm just screaming, screw it, let it go. We got backups. That's what I'm saying. Because I try to decentralize my backups from my local.
You guys ready for steak?
Yeah, it smells great.
Well, I appreciate you guys coming and listening to our talk.
Yes.
Is there any more questions? No. Okay.
If not, you come up here, chat with us. We'll be hanging around somewhere. But thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.